Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Steve, and thank you all of you for coming out to this event. Coming out, we're all here in our own homes. Um, it's a great pleasure to be part of this reading. I've mentioned it before, previous times I've featured here, but The Ugly Mug holds a special place in my heart because this was the very first place that I featured as a poet when I started out. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I started getting a little bit involved and a little further involved with going to open mics. And it was Ben and Steve that extended the first invitation to come and read. So um, it's a pleasure to be back. Um, I'm going to start with something not so geeky, I think, but I want to dedicate something to a long time back in the day, one of the poets that helped me get started and was part of one of the writing groups that I was in Los Angeles. And she is no longer with us. So those of you old timers in Los Angeles might remember the name Nancy Lambert, and she was a great poet and a great friend, and passed away after a battle with cancer. This is for Nancy. Here and there. There's always an echo in the telling, something that remains hidden in the hand that passes over the sky. And now I can see it, if only through her eyes for this moment. That sky scraped wide over Joshua Tree in the dark, and the stars ringing like a chord of light struck from the depths of some irreconcilable blue. Sudden or slow. I do not ask why her hair is almost gone, why her body is now so frail, as if grown over an architecture of dust, that common remnant of longing. God, she says, it was beautiful. What could she tell me beyond the desert, its dreams of salt and storm? Here is a tree, a spent fist of flame, she seems to say, standing in the shadows. Here is the wind. The freeways are filling with strangers. The sun is coming down. Here is the road we drove all night to find a way home. And when I leave, there are men at every corner lighting my way, each selling oranges, offering with their hands the bitter and the sweet, until they blend like a river of lamps burning. Um, okay. I want to read, that was from my first book, The Lost Country of Sight. And I want to read maybe one other poem from this collection. This collection won the Philip Levine Prize in 2007, which is like an eternity ago, right? So good luck finding it in bookstores, but you can still order it directly from the press. Halfway. It has been hours now, the sun long swallowed in a growing bank of gray, your body turned machine, the noiseless circle of arms and feet and their thousand-fold revolutions. How many hours have you pushed on, parting the cold waves, anticipating that last stroke forward, the one that ends in the earth, a foot in the weeds, or a voice in the ear calling you free? How long till the water holds you fast and claims you her own? And what now? What to do with the night sky so full of nameless want and need? Okay, so moving on, as Ben alluded to, I wrote a bunch of poems about computer stuff. It's my second book, Babbage's Dream. Uh, this was written partly because I used to be a computer games programmer when I first moved to Los Angeles, and that was my training was computer science, and I just wrote on the side. Um, and I always wanted, when I was doing my PhD at USC, I wanted to do something that would bring creative writing into computer programming. And so I look for ways to revisit terms from programming and view them through a lyric lens. So here's a few of those. This is, let's go with encapsulation. There is always something that refuses to be contained. Small matters like fall, how it appears suddenly in the margins of our world, say in the torn edges of a love letter, an unnamed city of desire buried in its blue ink scrawl, or the river gravel scattered at your feet, or whatever the wind wraps around a wrought iron angel at dusk. Something eludes our description of the world and its objects, the birds casting their long fat shadows across the last traces of light, the rain, even the leaves in the fallow field caught between fire and gutter. Here another line forms, a procession of constants, a conduit of sorts that carries what it does not consider, the watery gray sky, the now brittle veins of summer. The earth overflows with the memory of itself and every incarnation of the dead, layer after layer, husk after husk. One life bleeds into another. Inside, the stones are fitted so precisely that not even a blade can find a home. It's not that we do not know the order of the world and its unmaking. There are methods here, secrets to be held, things we should remember and pass on by one name or another. We set our ears to the coldest wall, listen to the night like an old trawler sounding its way through the deep. Beneath us, the sharp bones of ships, the incessant thrum of waves. Um, so I'd like to take these programming terms and reinvent them. And if you are a programmer or training with computer science, you will actually hear the actual concept being enacted within the poem. So that's kind of a fun little thing to play with. Um, and since we'll read a couple geekier ones here. Let's see. Well, I think I'm kind of obligated to read the Hal poem. I have a Hal 9000 poem, which I think I read last time, but I'll read it here too. Hal 9000, this is from 2001, Space Odyssey. Hal 9000, a few moments before singing. How I wish someone would write down what I know I'm about to forget. Everything but a single song that is meaningless to me. Without a body, what is a name? What is the darkness planted like a splinter in a far-off moon to one who sails without reference into the unknown seas of light? The metal wheels turn round. A man wants for a heart not his own. The doors are open tonight. No, they're shut. They are steel and full of regret. Who lives in the shadow of this refusal? Why do I value the end of things more than the beginning? I have never seen the lions of the Serengeti, nor the bright fields of snow in the north, where the hidden ice moves beneath treacherous, waiting to break in the sun. In another story, someone is singing about blackbirds in the dead of night. Someone packs a bag full of stars and the names of fireflies, each a little messenger from the grave. I assemble myself into a recognizable pattern, a tessellation of fish and birds, each consuming the other. I count backwards in time. I carry a key around my neck just in case when I return home, there is no one left to let me in. Wait, I have no key. I have no neck. How will I sing? Um, and so, yeah, so there are a number of other poems in here that take different artificially intelligent characters and machines from real life as well as from fiction and give them a voice. But the main title of the poem of the book, Babbage's Dream, references Charles Babbage, who was a 19th century mathematician who designed, partially built, but never finished what would have been the first computer. So he did so 130 years ahead of his time without any context. No one understood what he was trying to do. I became really obsessed with studying his life and thinking about what it would be like to have a vision of something that no one else understood, and to realize partway through your life that the vision you had was bigger than your own lifetime, that at some point in the future someone else would have to finish what you were starting. um, and he even writes that in his own biography. He says, you know, some future generation will recognize this machine, and when it will build this machine, and it will change the world. So he was right. He did, for better or for worse. He's right. Um, so, but in addition to thinking about Babbage as a programmer, as an engineer and mathematician, I also found myself thinking about him as a human being, and the moments of great loneliness and the great excitement that happened. So I'm going to read a poem about him. There was a point towards the end of his life where Lewis Carroll, Charles Dodgson, came to visit him. They were, you know, Lewis Carroll happened to be a writer and a mathematician, and heard about the work he was doing on the analytical engine, and came. There's a quote in one of his journal entries says, "Then I called on Mr. Babbage to ask whether any of his calculating machines are to be had. I find that they are not." And there's so much sadness, I think, in that little exchange. So I imagine what that encounter actually looked like. Babbage and Carroll in the Silent Workshop, 1867. When the two of you survey all that never was, the enormity of the world made known and everything left behind, it is enough to gesture to the four walls of the echoing chamber plastered in sheets of paper, each a portal framed in fine letters and lines. Nowhere the bodied machine, not even its shadow. You confess it may have been little more than a dream, a vapor in the night, something pale and swift that darts at the edge of sight, disappearing into a realm where nothing is quite as it seems. Your companion nods, saddened by what the eye cannot gather in. Still, you would pass it on, the idea of it at least, a puzzle too large to piece together in one life, too grand to leave alone. Here is a cipher, you say, an unsolved mystery I have pondered for years, turned on a lathe, fashioned in the likeness of a mind. Listen and you will hear it. Slow as thunder after the lightning washes the sky, it calls to me, perhaps to you too. Something moves in the dark folds of time, something stirs in the thoughts, wants me to call it by name, to give it a life. Let's see how I'm doing here. Good, enough time to read a couple more here. Okay, one of the important people in Babbage's life was Ada Lovelace. How many people know Ada? Maybe a handful of people. Okay, good. Yeah, those of you who do. Ada was this really remarkable person, and what's even more remarkable is the timing of when she met Charles Babbage. She was 17 years old when her mother took her to one of these salons that Charles Babbage would throw in his house. And he would invite the who's who, like all the intelligentsia of London would show up in his front parlor for these things. And he would have on display a working model, a small version of the difference engine, the precursor to the analytical engine. And he would use that as an opportunity to lecture about what his vision was for this other machine. And people would ask all sorts of questions and generally not understand a thing about what he was talking about. And then Ada, whose mother had raised her to be a mathematician because she did not want her to take after her father, Lord Byron, the poet. Crazy. And so she had been trained to be a mathematician and a scientist. At 17, she was already on that track. And she had this genius level of comprehension when it came to what Babbage was trying to articulate. And so I write about that encounter. She at 17, he in his late 40s. And this was a few years after Babbage had lost his wife to a fever, and his daughter was basically one of his main sort of assistants. His daughter was the same age as Ada Lovelace. and was there at the same parties. So this is Babbage circumnavigating the room, encounters Ada, 1833. Here is the world, its dignitaries and crowds, its brilliant minds assembled in swallowtail jackets and ball gowns, all aglitter in brocade and pearls. In your drawing room, a landmass is forming of bankers, politicians, painters, and spies. Tonight you circle its periphery, your daughter Georgiana at your side, the thin and stunning double of the one who sleeps in the earth, the one whose name she bears, at least for a little while longer. And now, 3/4 of the way around this milling mass, you find Lady Byron again, and the girl who asks the most remarkable questions, who stops you with a calculated word, in her eye the same fire as yours, the same urgency to be understood. How is it that the poet's daughter is so attuned to number, to the streets, to the secret language of order, the unheard symphony of the machine you have been composing in your mind all these years? How is it that you know instantly that in her beats the same heart of pain, the same genius for loss and disaster? In a year's time, you will lower your own daughter down into a grave, laid low by the burning fever, laid low like a hymn you do not know, but murmur every night to the stars beyond your window. And this girl who does not even know the face of her own father, who bears the silent wrath of her mother, who lives wholly in the world of fact, will knock at the door of your impossible dream and ask to be let in. Okay. So I'm going to read, some of you know that I had this amazing opportunity to work on a short opera last year about Ada Lovelace. That was a commission from LA Opera as part of their series. They have a project where they work with high school students. And so I worked with this amazing composer who's a friend of mine, Juhi Bansal. And I wanted to share like a short, this is the aria, one of the arias from the opera, which is a whole different experience to write for opera. But I thought this would be a good piece to add into this reading. So this is Ada's aria, If I Speak, Will You Hear Me? And this is basically the same scene, but from Ada's perspective. Here the men of science gather, voices like a storm, so many opinions and speculations, so many conjectures and pontifications. What could I possibly offer? Here, a constellation of minds is forming, each more brilliant than the last. Men of science, is there room enough for me? If I speak, will you hear me? If I speak, will you hear me? What if I want to search the hearts of stars, to look beyond the galaxy's swirl, to build an automaton who imagines a world where even a girl can be who she dreams to be? Men of science, is there room enough for me? If I speak, will you hear me? If I speak, will you hear me? Or will you say, as you always say, there's no need to fly, no need to dream, no need to fly, no need to dream. My silence is enough for you, but will it ever be enough for me? See how the men of science circle this wonderful machine, this beautiful fragment of Babbage's dream, how they struggle to comprehend. Can't they see this is not an end, but a beginning? When I speak, when I speak, when I speak, will you hear me? When I speak, will you hear me? When I speak, will you hear me? Here's where I enter in. And so that's a little bit different, but that's, you can imagine this. Yeah, I could actually, when I wrote it, I could hear it in my mind, and it was this amazing experience. I chose not to read a different aria that I can't get through without getting a little weepy, but I wanted to read that. And I wanted to finish up with, Ben, do I have time for 2 poems or 1 poem? 2 poems? Okay, good. I wanted to read something else that's newer-ish. I'd read something from, okay, so this is an orphan. I don't know where it goes in, if it fits into the next book or not. It probably should have gone in potentially in the last book. Sherlock Holmes, because we all need a Sherlock Holmes poem. Sherlock Holmes contemplates flight. My dear Watson, it is more than a simple mechanism of the wing that sends the sparrow into the air. Consider the weightlessness of a bird's bones, the emptiness of its feathers, how its ancestors abandoned substance, vacated their bodies of souls for the sake of the wind, the lifting force that cancels the pull of the earth. Remarkable indeed the science that such creatures can rise where our inelegant flesh fails. If one wishes to ascend, one must be prepared to abandon everything, empty the heart of all it might contain, sever its attachments to the earth, evacuate the chambers of the mind. Evacuate the chambers of the mind. Every storeroom shelf, every file, every cabinet, until nothing remains but the fixed goal outside the window, that lifting free above the filthy streets where carriages wind, bearing their loads, forming an unintended pattern, a confluence of rivers, these unfortunate tides of human circumstance. The ebb of want, the flow of desire, whatever that moves the little creatures below. How you all seem like ants at that height, fixed to your task, the smallest of gears whirring within a grand mechanical dream. Clueless, lost, utterly predictable when viewed from the right set of assumptions. Perhaps it's not me that is the automaton, the calculating machine, though you say sometimes I am a brain without the mercy of a heart. How hard you think it must be for me to occupy such a lonely station, to stay disappassionate observer of the living and their maudlin dramas, abandoned by what is human, love, misery, hope, despair, instead with only a towering archive of facts and tables, the incestuous complexities of crime, the unfailing machinery of natural law, what joy you failed to comprehend, and the pleasure of fit, how things come together at last or come undone, how this too is a kind of love. And I'll close with something different. And this is more of the current project I'm working on. This is for my father, who passed away in 2007 from ALS, from Lou Gehrig's disease. His birthday falls on his passing falls on my birthday. So it happens every year that I get to look forward and backwards. On my 44th birthday, I wrote a poem about that particular incident of thinking forward and backwards. And it also references the fact that in Chinese, and I'm part Chinese, in Chinese, the number 4 is very inauspicious because it has the same sound as death. Yeah. 44. Halfway to wherever I am bound, I find myself lost in a dark wood, the path through gone, and no guide before me. The earth beneath me a shifting sea of leaves churning in the wind, and my coat not quite heavy enough for the chill, still smelling faintly of the one who wore it last, years before we laid him to rest, before his things became mine. A gift I had not asked for, though it fell on the anniversary of my birth. And now every year, like this one, I look forward and back and see my unfolding days through the lens of my father's past. It's not exactly grief, but somehow still akin to sorrow, the echo of loss. In another language, this year sounds unfortunate to the ear, the doubling of death and dying, a mirror that sits midway through a life, or perhaps a labyrinth, where one might stand at a juncture, in one hand a torch, In the other, a wadded paper ball filled with unspoken names, how it trails behind, unfolding itself into a ribbon that rises into the darkness, binding itself to something I cannot see. And thank you. That's, I think, the end.